Okay, so I think we'll go ahead and get started. I think the senator's running just a few minutes late, but we'll give her a chance to catch up. And I want to respect your time. Again, my name's Nils Andreas, and I'm the Executive Director of the Institute of the North, and have been really grateful to have been able to collaborate with the Wilson Center on organizing the Arctic Economic Development Forum. I should say one of the most surprising things about organizing this forum is how surprised people are that we're organizing this forum. Everybody, it seems like a number of people, especially within DC, have said, well, we don't talk about Arctic economic development. We talk about Russia, and we talk about security, and we talk about icebreakers. So I've been really grateful to have had this opportunity. Really excited about the sessions that we've had, including some of the action items that I think were identified early on, and continue to look forward to the upcoming sessions. So with that as an introduction, I should also note that for the Institute of the North, a non-governmental, non-profit organization in Alaska, economic development by the people of the North is really at the heart of why we are. And so we work really closely with Alaskans on these exact issues, as well as with a network around the Arctic. So we've got a circumpolar scope, hopefully delivering best practices back to the state. I haven't had the honor of visiting Faroe Islands, but I'm hoping that as a result of moderating this session, I get an invitation.
It's hereby given. It's hereby given. Yes. More than welcome.
So far today, I have almost gained Norwegian citizenship and an invitation to Faroe Islands. So I'm doing really well for myself. I'd like to introduce Mr. Skala, Member of Parliament, Faroe Islands, to the Denmark Parliament, and you serve a dual role there too. Give you an opportunity to make a short presentation, and then I'll turn to Senator Murkowski.
This is like the melting ice of the Arctic. We started up supposed to be 5 people in this panel. We got down to 4, down to 3, and now we're sitting here just 2. The ice is melting. Magni Arge, my colleague, the dear Honorable Magni Arge, had a presentation this morning of the Faroe Islands, so it will maybe overlap a little bit, but I'll fill in some gaps though. He mentioned the quite trivial fact that the man who discovered America was from the Faroe Islands. I'd like to add that the Faroe Islands, of course, also was the first country on the planet to put a man on the moon. But when you're small, it's sometimes difficult to get the news out there. No, seriously though, you did not know I was joking. I was. I should have kept it. I want to say thank you to the organizers for arranging this. It's very important for us that economical activity comes on the agenda, high on the agenda, because much of the agenda, as Nils said, when we discuss Arctic, has been preserving the environment, avoiding armed conflicts and so on, which is all very, very, very important. But economical activity is also very important for us who live there. And there's no need of being any contradiction between economical development, investments, and protection of the environment. They can go hand in hand. And we are sometimes a bit afraid that the Arctic organizations shall end up turning against the people of the Arctic. This can happen. This is what, for example, happened in the IWC, the International Whaling Organization. It started up as a whaling organization, or an organization for whalers, about sustainable harvest of marine mammals, and ended up being an organization that banned whaling, and it turned against the people it was supposed to represent. This must not happen in the Arctic. The Arctic must not become a reservoir for people that live far from the Arctic. These are the Arctic strategies of Denmark to the left and of the Faroe Islands to the right. The Faroe Islands is a country within the Danish kingdom. And these, we talk a lot about economical development, which is really important to the Kingdom of Denmark. For some years, until maybe just 1 or 2 years ago, what we dreamed of when we talked about economical activity in the Arctic was oil. We drilled and drilled and drilled, and nothing is produced yet, and now it's totally vanished. As the prices are now, nothing is going to happen, and it's left. Maybe for the good. We dreamed of this easy future, but also maybe a bit slippery future. It could be dangerous. Maybe it's for the best that we left it. But we are still investing in energy. We're now investing in wind energy. We just opened a big park in the Faroes last year, a wind park. And we are investing in tide energy, in current energy, getting the energy out of the sea, and with very good results. So that's an example of how you can invest and protect the environment at the same time. This is like two sides of the same coin. Of course, the interest for the Arctic is huge. This is Greenland. This is a cruise ship in Greenland. These are the Faroe Islands, cruise ships in the Faroe Islands. The interest has exploded the last years, and we're trying to get a bit of a part of this cake. We're investing in new harbors. We have 6 harbors. We're investing in making them bigger, making the biggest investments we've ever done. And of course, these are pictures of income, of money, of jobs. But the biggest possibility for us, obviously, is this. It's quite symptomatic that when I'm talking about the Kingdom of Denmark, Denmark is not on the picture at all, because what makes Denmark an Arctic nation is Greenland first and foremost, which is in the Arctic, and then the Faroe Islands, which are on the threshold between the Arctic and Europe. The central red arrow points just at the Faroe Islands. This means that the Faroe Islands are right on the middle of one of the main roads of future global traffic. And how can we get money out of that? How can we get jobs out of that? We're trying to sell the Faroe Islands as some kind of pit stop, where future ships that sail the northern routes come in and change crew, refuel, buy food, and make reparations and so on. But sometimes we are very small, just 50,000 people, but sometimes in the minds of our future partners, we are even smaller, and they don't think that the Faroe Islands can deliver these things. So we do. Even if we are microscopically small, we still are complete. It's a complete country with everything that the country needs. So we need to stand together. As we are in Washington, I can use a Lincolnian phrase and saying what we are doing is creating a team of rivals. We're gathering shipyards, hotels, competing companies, and trying to get them to stand together and sell the Faroe Islands as a package to ships that are in the area, and it works quite well actually. We created this. This is a homepage that I, as a politician, have taken steps to create. All the branches. If you need divers, if you need electricity, if you need freezing, if you need shipyards, you click on the name and you see all the companies that offer these services. It's been quite successful, and this is how we can get a bit of the cake that is standing on the table at the moment. These are the Scandinavian countries. The Scandinavian countries, when you listen to, for example, Bernie Sanders, when he has his speeches, and when he always compares the US to other countries, he says, in Germany they have free schools and free social health service, and they do in France, and they do in the UK, and they do in Scandinavia, as if Scandinavia was one country. It is 5 states and 7 countries. Of course, they are very much alike, but there is a problem because we don't cooperate as much as we should do, partly because of the fact that 3 of the 5 states are members of NATO, 2 of the 5 states are members of the EU, the others are not. And if we look at the Kingdom of Denmark, for example, Denmark proper is a member of the EU, Greenland and the Faroe Islands are outside the EU. This sometimes makes cooperation a little bit difficult, but we must aim at creating a situation where Scandinavia in the Arctic terms are one. And that's why we welcome very much an initiative taken by Barack Obama. He has invited all the Scandinavian leaders to a meeting in the White House on the 13th of May. This is the first time this happens. It's a really important step, and it shows that the US sees Scandinavia as one, or at least it has the idea that the Scandinavia should be as one. And we definitely agree upon that. So I'm really excited about what comes out of that meeting. And I know that the Scandinavian countries also have the same idea. We must cooperate far more in the Arctic. For example, when it comes to search and rescue, of course Norway has lots of ships and very good logistical systems, but in the Faroe Islands, to be honest, there are far many more ships than there were a few years ago. But the search and rescue situation is not good enough. The cruise ships that go to Greenland, for example, take quite a big risk because there's no search and rescue in the area. So this must be addressed commonly. And we're also asked about to say something about Russia. What we think about Russia, cooperating with Russia. If we read the Russian Arctic strategy, it says that the zone should be used as a strategic resource base. The cooperation and peace should be preserved. The ecological systems should be preserved. The Northern Sea route, of course, should be used. What it says is only positive. What we say ourselves as well. And I think we need to take that at face value, because it's extremely important to the Arctic, to Russia, and to the world as a whole, that even if we have a very, very severe and serious conflict with Russia in the south, we must not have the same conflict in the north. We must try to cooperate as much as possible when it comes to trade and so on with Russia in the north, at the same time as we have a huge conflict in the south. Because if we allow the conflict over Ukraine to spill over into the Arctic, the situation will be far worse for everybody. And this is the Faroese flag and the Russian flag. And in this situation, we are a bit special. We have a little bit special situation because the Faroe Islands is the only Western country that has not sanctioned Russia and has not been sanctioned in reverse. So we still sell food to Russia as the only country, Western country. And I know this has caused raised eyebrows in Washington here and in Brussels as well. But I think it's very important that we keep on having these doors open, because if we refuse to sell anything food to Russia, they would probably abandon the fishery agreements they have with Greenland, with Faroes, with Iceland, with Norway, and with the EU, setting their own unilateral quotas, and then we would have this conflict spilling over into the Arctic. This is why we must believe what the Russians say when they talk about the Arctic. And I would like to end with a phrase that was in one of the articles we got outside the door here, which says that regions that attract powerful states make competition hard to avoid, but they allow many possibilities for managing that competition. That is the role of statesmanship. Wishful thinking about friendship and worst-case thinking about war encourage dangerous measures of appeasement and provocation. Honest appraisal of differences allows for a coexistence and even mutual gains. So until Russia crosses a very, very crucial line, we should cooperate as much as we can. Would be my opening remarks. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Skalev. Fascinating and really informative. Senator, I got really excited about the panel and got started early.
That's a good thing.
But we're excited to have you too. And I want to give you an opportunity. I know you spoke this morning, but anything you would like to elaborate on right now, please feel free.
Well, and I'll just keep my comments.
And have 3 microphones even.
Boy, I'm really covered here. Kind of scares me on all sides here. But given that I did have about 15 minutes earlier this morning, I don't want to repeat myself. I'm pleased to be part of the panel. Sorry that we were not able to have our friends from Norway and Russia join us, but understand their travel issues. But as we were on this panel tasked to speak about how we can be champions for economic development and how to advance a northern agenda, you know, I think about the challenges that we have here in the United States and some of the education issues that we face here in the Congress. And I mentioned that the fact that Senator King and I have joined together to bring awareness and education about through this Arctic caucus. But it also speaks to the reality that within an administration, you've got a lot of Arctic plans out there. And many of you have been part of different Arctic plans coming out of different departments. And you can have as many plans as you want, but if you don't have the resources behind it, it's a pretty good wish list. So we need to do more than just have that wish list. And again, making sure that the Arctic is a priority within the United States, within our government, is, I think, a very multifaceted, multi-pronged approach. Obviously, one prong of that, and a very critical one, is the executive branch. And what President Obama has done with his visit to the Arctic last September, kind of shining the spotlight on some of the issues that impact us, most notably in his case, raising the issue of the impact of climate change on some of our northern communities, but also getting the agencies really focused on what is happening within the Arctic and pressing these initiatives as budget priorities in the annual request. So we're starting to see that, certainly good news for us with the acceleration of a schedule for the icebreaker, money in the budget for the icebreakers. We're seeing that really start to advance, and I think that is significant. I always want more, and that's part of our job. And that's the other prong. You've got the executive prong, but you've clearly got the role that we have in Congress, the role that we have to make infrastructure a priority in our bills. I serve on the Appropriations Committee, so within my committees and on the other committees I'm on, when any secretary comes before me, my question to them is, so where have you put your money where your mouth is in terms of Arctic priorities? And so I want them to squirm a little bit or be ready with the answer when they see me coming. And I think Senator King is engaged with this as well, doing more of that, just kind of daily and persistent pressure, saying, it's one thing to talk about it, it's one thing to have a plan, how are we going to resource? I mentioned the Senate Arctic Caucus. On the House side, they have an Arctic working group that has been formed. So these are good process pieces, but how we can do more than just focus on an icebreaker, because it seems that we have gotten colleagues in line and understanding that an icebreaker must be a priority. Senator King was right on the money when he said this is not a new icebreaker, this is a replacement icebreaker, and how we're going to be doing more. I keep hearing this term, our icebreaker fleet, and I suggest that, well, one icebreaker does not a fleet make. And that's not being dismissive towards the Healy, because I have great respect for her capabilities. She has proven herself very resourceful. But the Healy is not a full-on polar class icebreaker, and that's what this country needs. We need not only one, we need what the Coast Guard had recommended, which was three medium strength and 3 full heavy strength. So that's an important part of it. But we can't think that just because we're now on track with an icebreaker that somehow or other we have checked the box and we've taken care of the Arctic. There is so much more to that. And so making sure that the interest on these issues is expanded is something that we are working to do. I had an opportunity to bring a couple colleagues on an Arctic CODEL. We left from Washington, D.C. We went to Iceland, then went over to Svalbard, then popped over to Thule, and over to Barrow, and then back to D.C. We did that in a weekend. But what is amazing is when you go that way across the top of the globe, you don't lose sleep, you gain all kinds of daylight, and we were able to pack in more. And we had one day that was 36 hours, and gosh, we got a lot done. So we've looked at other ways to try to encourage Congress to do more. You just need to spend more time up in the Arctic moving around. But the other prong is what happens at the state and the local level, and making sure that it's not just members of Congress that understand it, because when you're talking about resourcing, if people in Iowa or Nebraska, I don't know why I always pick on those two states, but if they believe that an icebreaker is really just an Alaskan earmark, it's going to be tough to get support. If they believe that all things that are supposedly Arctic specific don't have anything to do with their states, that doesn't help their lawmakers then vote in support of these initiatives. So it really is a much broader grassroots effort in terms of education and advocacy. And then the final prong goes beyond our borders of government, and it's this cross-border investment and a recognition that we need to really be thinking about this whole area at the top of the globe as an area really without border in many ways, and how we can do more from the investment perspective. Alaska and Norway working together, Alaska and Iceland working together from an investment perspective, but also just in terms of how we think about sharing expertise, sharing research. When we talk about the search and rescue capability, how we can do more with that cross-border investment that works to benefit us all. So with that, Nils, I think it's probably best for me to stop talking and get to the panel here, or how you want to handle the panel.
Sure. No, thank you. And thanks for those remarks. I think I'd just like to follow up with you. I know, so my firm belief is that the Arctic parliamentarians are just an amazing group of economic development champions, and that you're, how many people know that there is a group called the Arctic Parliamentarians? Okay.
Good.
So a fair number, and that the senator is ours, right? An amazing group of people who are completely responsive to constituents, who understand the Arctic and Alaska in this case, Faroe Islands, and that. Can you just talk a little bit about your participation in that body and the things that you've seen come out of it?
I'm happy to, because it is something that I have been engaged with for, I'm looking at Bjorn, Willie, and Isaac. How many years, Isaac? It's been since I came, maybe 2 years after I got here. Yeah. So it's been a dozen years probably that I have been involved on the Standing Committee on the Arctic Parliamentarians, and I believe I am the most senior member, which basically means that I have survived some elections, but also that I've kept the commitment to this organization, because in my view, the value of these relationships that we build as members of Congress, members of Parliament, working together, and as you point out, we are very in tune with our constituents that are focused on whether it's economic development or the health and safety and well-being of our indigenous peoples. It's very much a group of lawmakers that come together on several times a year to talk through some of the more granular issues. Now, I've been involved now in several Arctic Council meetings, just there as an observer invited, certainly along with Admiral Papp here, and very important outcomes from Arctic Council. But I like to think that the work that we do as part of the parliamentarians body is again perhaps just a little more local, getting a little more into the details, but recognizing that we can complement the work that goes on within the council. So it is something that, again, I think maybe it's because we're a little bit more under the radar here than the Arctic Council that we're able to do the work that we need to do. But it is, I think it's significant in terms of the relationships that are built and therefore the issues that we are able to take up one with another.
Yeah, thank you. I would just commend to everyone here that I think the next Arctic parliamentarians meeting is in June of this year.
Yes,
the reports that are produced from those events are really impressive, and Bjorn really paid me to say this, but no, he didn't. Really impressive and cover these range of issues at a level that I think makes a lot of sense, especially for Alaskans and for peoples in the Arctic. So I really appreciate that work. Mm-hmm. Mr. Scally, I'm really impressed with the work that the Nordic states have done to promote regional cooperation, collaboration. I'm thinking about a couple different levels, and you mentioned a few, but also there's good collaboration through the West Nordic Council, Greenland, Iceland, Faroe Islands. There's certainly your relationships with Denmark. Can you talk a little bit more about business development in the region from a regional development perspective, and not just in how you compete with all of those as well?
No. Well, the business development goes on country per country. There's not very much cross-border businesses going on. Of course, firms or companies are working in different countries, but it's not seen as one area when it comes to business.
Okay.
Denmark is one country, Sweden is one country, and they're of course competing.
Who's winning? No.
At the moment, Sweden is winning. Actually,
Sweden is
creating 150,000 jobs last year, I think it was. Yeah.
Okay. Great. But at a policy level, much more united in how you...
Yeah, of course. We have this Nordic Council, of course, and like 5-6 years ago, nobody talked about defense issues in the Nordic Council. Now, the defense ministers of the Scandinavian countries meet and discuss common issues, even if we have 3 members of NATO and 3 that are not members of NATO, and there's a problem of information sharing and so on, but still we see the necessity. We are in the same boat. We have the same systems. We have the same environment, the same challenges. So we need to cooperate even more than we do.
Right. Senator, do you see that happening at all between? I have to think not subnational, between Russia, the U.S., and Canada? At that same level, or even between, say, Yukon, Alaska, and Chukotka? Or the possibility for that happening?
I think clearly there is that possibility for that happening because of commonality of issues. Certainly you see some good examples of cooperation in areas like research, the research that we share with Canada, just the acquisition of research through utilizing our vessel, the Healy, along with it was the Louis Saint Laurent a couple years ago. So you have examples like that where there is assistance together to to work on some of these initiatives. In fairness, some of the political tensions that we are having right now with Russia make it more complicated from a policy perspective. It was a couple years ago we were planning an Arctic Parliamentarians Conference, and there was a real question about the invitation extended to all members, and it was not because of issues that had come about in our discussions, but it was the higher politics, and that is a reality that we deal with. But I think it is important to note that, again, whether you're Arctic parliamentarians or your Arctic Council, the desire to have some of these issues debated and discussed and worked through in a cooperative, collaborative way is part of the bright spot, I think, that you have with the Arctic, because there's a commitment to be working on these issues jointly, and I think we ought not lose sight of that, because there will be tensions. There are tensions certainly to the south, but if there are areas of common ground that we can help foster at another level, that's a good thing for us. So whether it's policy, whether it's research, whether it is just some of the issues between our indigenous peoples. You asked the question about, you know, our Canadian neighbors or over in the Chukotka. There are those efforts led primarily by indigenous peoples to connect with relatives on the other side of the Bering Straits there. So these types of relationships, I think, are things that should be encouraged.
Right. And maybe they're happening at a subnational or even personal, individual level beyond what the U.S. or D.C. or Moscow can accomplish. Right.
I can add to the Scandinavian situation that a citizen from Norway that goes to Denmark has the same rights as a Dane. In all the 5 states, there are full rights for each other citizens, almost. No, you can't vote, of course. There is some social thing that you can't become part of, but almost everything. So it's like being in one country.
Yeah. From a Faroe Islands perspective, what is your relationship with Denmark, and to what extent do they determine, your decisions in Faroe Islands, especially as they apply to economic development? Or we heard earlier conversations about regulatory certainty. Who's in charge?
The Faroe Islands have a very, very far-reaching autonomy within the Danish kingdom. There's not one single law implemented in the Faroe Islands that does not go through the Faroese parliament, and we're fully in charge of our own economy. So it's as far-reaching an autonomy as you can have, actually, without becoming a sovereign state.
And on Alaska's, no, I'm just kidding.
Don't go there.
I'm gonna. Maybe that's a segue to something else. Sue Harper earlier brought up CanNor, the Canadian Northern Economic Development Agency, which is how Canada's approached, I think in many ways, their economic development in the North. Very responsive to each of the territories, inclusive, working with industry, working on projects. Is there something similar on the U.S. side that is either doing that, or does the U.S. need its own U.S. NOR or something to that effect? Who's driving economic development in Alaska's Arctic, in the U.S. Arctic?
I mean, truly, it's not the government. It's
Right.
not the federal government that is assisting or helping to build it out. In fact, if anything, there are many of us that believe that they're doing what they can to hinder economic development. And that doesn't help us. That doesn't help the indigenous peoples. It doesn't help. It doesn't help the region. Who's leading the economic development? That is coming from the native corporations, who are poised in a very strong place to help lead economic development within their own region, whether it's Arctic Slope Regional Corporation that is looking with their interests as well as the native interests at the tribal level to access their resources, whether it is NANA Corporation, a little bit further south in the northwest area, developing their zinc resources and have been for decades now. So they are poised clearly to help access economic development. So it's the native corporations. It's private investment, although that is limited, and then the state. The state has been there to help facilitate economic development, but as you and I know, these are tough times for our state now as we're seeing oil production down, oil prices down. The state's treasury is not what it once was, and so there's a lag there. But yeah, it is definitely not on the federal side.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, I'd like to open it up to audience questions right here at the front.
Hi, Senator. Monique Baskin from NOAA, and I was told by Jeremy Mathis to tell you that I work with him, so I'm mentioning
You're with
that
a good guy.
Yes, awesome guy. But I wanted to comment or ask a question on your comment with regards to the federal policies not moving forward the Alaskan economic development. How can the federal government get out of the way? How can me as a fellow push that forward?
Well, it's an important question, and I appreciate it. I think one of the ways that we can work to provide for the needed economic development in the region is to ensure that the regulations that come our way I don't want to suggest that they're not thoughtful. What I will suggest is that we have a bad practice at the government level, and it's not just the federal government level, at the government level of putting a regulation on top of a regulation on top of a regulation. So at the end of the day, you've got so much overlap, it's so overburdened, and it hasn't helped you get to where you're ultimately seeking to get. So let's look consciously at the process that we have in place. I don't know how streamlining permitting got to be such a negative context that somehow or other we're throwing out all of our environmental safeguards. That's not what it should be about. It should be about a critical examination in a timely manner in a way that is not, again, costly or just excessive. And so I think it's fair to be looking at how our regulatory process is at play right now, because that is causing a delay in our ability to advance initiatives within the Arctic. So I would just start with the permitting, and if we can figure out a way to clean that up, expedite it, allow for something that is truly meaningful when we say streamlining, I think you've made progress. Tell Jeremy that he's doing a good job.
Yeah, from the Alaska corner in the, they're all together. Gail.
Yeah.
Gail Schubert with Bering Straits Native Corporation, and I want to raise something that it doesn't have anything to do with federal regulation. It does have to do with economic development in rural Alaska, including a lot of my communities, and that is that there are a number of states recently that have started adopting laws that prohibit the sale and purchase of items made from ivory, sea otter, whalebone, and that sort of thing. And, you know, as you know, Senator, a lot of our communities don't have economic opportunities. You can't just, you know, quit your job and find another job the next day. Jobs are scarce out there. And so we, speaking on behalf of the people from the Bering Strait region, would really like and appreciate your support and the support of people here to educate people and maybe turn back those laws that would really harm our rural communities.
Well, if I may respond, thank you, Gail, for the statement, the comment, because in so many of our villages, and particularly the small villages that not only do not have a means of a local economy, they're limited in how they are able to communicate with the rest of the world, and so even further limited. In certain parts of the Arctic, you're geographically isolated, but you have the ability to stay in touch and communicate and engage in commerce because you have access to internet. You are able to communicate. We need to do more to ensure that our most remote communities and villages have that access, so that if they are the native artist who wants to produce a product, that they're able to market and sell that without having to leave the village. But your point about our federal laws that are inhibiting the use of using some of the materials that have historically been allowed, I think this is something, again, we want to make sure that nobody is going out and engaging in wanton waste and take of an animal for purposes of, for instance, the walrus tusk. Not acceptable. But we have federal laws in place to prohibit just that. So we have done that. We've ensured that that does not happen. And if somebody does that, the criminal penalties are quite significant. And so what we need to do is make sure that when our native people are able to access, whether it's ivory or baleen or feathers or whatever it is, that there is an ability to provide for a market. I think our federal laws, as they relate to how we ensure that we do not engage in illegal take of animals or birds, are strong, are robust. If for some reason we feel that they're not strong enough, that's something that we can take a look at. But when people think that they might not be able to buy this ivory and baleen bracelet because it might possibly be something that was not allowed, was not lawful, then that artist in Shishmaref is no longer able to pay his or her fuel bill. That doesn't work either. So there's an education component to it. There's a requirement that we have to make sure that the laws are right and appropriate, but making sure that you can then market those products is important as well.
Yeah, I want to build off that a little bit, and then I know Mead and Drew. But Mr. Schuyler, do you want to talk a little bit about especially the geographical remoteness and how you address the challenge?
I'd like to add a bit to that, what they talked about. It's like it's a double thing. We have to allow what is sustainable and forbid what is forbidden, what is threatening the species. Our problem is that we have to fight to do what we think is and know is sustainable, because different so-called animal welfare organizations want us to stop whaling, for example, sustainable whaling, and there's grown this sort of religious idea about certain animals that are more than other animals, almost human. You know, marine mammals are something totally different from a pig or for a cow. It must be protected, must not be killed. So the fact that we, for example, kill an average of 700 pilot whales a year is a huge thing in the whole world, and huge campaigns going every single year. And I receive in my mailbox hundreds of mails sometimes hundreds per minute when it's really up there to stop this. I mean, there are billions and billions and billions of animals killed every year for food production, but the animals that we in the Arctic live from and harvest sustainably are by some strange logic put in another category. They're not animals. They're, I don't know what they are, between animals and humans. This is a great challenge to us, and sometimes we lose markets, and we have to stand up for that. I think it's very important for the Arctic countries to stand up for our rights to harvest sustainably. I think it was really good when the EU applied for becoming an observer in the Arctic Council. Canada said no because they banned the seal from Canada. There was this phrase saying "no seal, no deal." Open up your markets to our seal products, and then we maybe give you allow you to become an observer. We have to stand up and be more fight more for our rights, I think, sometimes.
Yeah, great, thank you.
I'd like to add what I said yesterday, a moment ago, about the relationship between Denmark and the Faroes. We have a far-reaching economy. Just to have it right, there are some areas that are common, police, judicial systems, and so on. This is run from Denmark. And we also receive, like, was it $100 million a year in block grant. So just to put that right.
Thank you. I think does the U.S. give Alaska a block grant?
We're waiting for it.
We're waiting for it. Mead?
Senator, thank you for your leadership on keeping America understanding why it needs icebreakers, and we need it to defend our coastline, to protect our coastline in terms of environment and fisheries enforcement, all of that. To the extent that it helps China trade with France, as an example, how can we collect fees that would help pay for icebreakers? We have the authority under Law of the Sea, except we haven't signed Law of the Sea. We don't collect fees in the Great Lakes. Canada does collect fees. Russia collects fees. And it just seems to me that if we're going to make, say that again? Just, what? We don't. Oh, you don't? But I guess, how do we enlist Asia to help pay for the benefits of this ocean as we get the right kind of icebreaker coverage in the Arctic?
I'm just tempted to say some wisecrack like, you know, we're going to build a wall and have somebody else pay for it. We're going to build our icebreaker and have China pay for it.
Chatham House rules.
You know, you raise an interesting question, Mead, and let's put this in the context not of what we're trying to do up in the Arctic. But, you know, you think about the work that goes on down in Antarctica. The United States provides for pretty good service down there for us and for our facilities, most certainly. But our icebreaker, the Polar Star that is down there now, is there to help others. Do we get reimbursement if we help break somebody out? No. Is it possible that we should? Should we look at that? It does cause you to wonder, because there are places, certainly, and let's just use Antarctica as our example right now. There are places where there is a kind of a growing reliance on U.S. asset. And so if China, turn yourself north now, is going to be utilizing these Arctic waterways to help facilitate transit for their products, gaining the benefit of additional weeks off of transit time, saves them money, and we've kind of, quote, paved the way for them. So I'm not suggesting that that we look now to some kind of a transit fee if you go through the Bering Straits there, but it does cause you to wonder if through the cooperative entities that we have, the Arctic Council, the Arctic parliamentarians, what kind of conversations might be had about just this. Because as we look at the composition of the council and the parliamentarians, you have those that are the official members, but then you have all of the observers, and those observers are not just there because they don't have anything else better to do. They're very interested in what they stand to gain from an opening and expanded Arctic. So as they stand to gain something from it, does it not make sense that they would somehow or other be a participant in some of the cost sharing that could go on, whether from a search and rescue perspective or again from an opening of additional commerce. Those conversations, I don't think have you can say have gelled to the point where there's real thought given to it. But if you're just kind of thinking 30,000 feet, if there's benefit that is being provided for the broader populace, how are some of those costs shared?
Yeah. A quick question, Drew. I'm not just calling on people whose names I know. I just not seeing any other hands.
Thank you very much. And this, you segued into Antarctica, and that was going to be my question. Understanding that a new icebreaker will spend a great deal of its time in Antarctica and has to be designed not just for Arctic ice, but for Antarctic ice, and oh, by the way, to be able to make that trip twice a year. What is it that has caused the U.S. Senate to allow the Alaska delegation to look as though asking for an icebreaker or somehow Alaska earmarks? And why should the two of you be carrying the weight of something that also helps in the Antarctic for 6 months out of the year? Is there collective amnesia? Is it just, oh, well, let Lisa do it? What is going on, and how can we change that? How can we change that thought process? Because it's certainly not fair to put it all on you.
Well, I appreciate that, Drew, and I appreciate what you have done and so many in advocating on these issues. You meet so many in the back there that kind of the Alaska group
Right there.
that is so engaged in so many of these issues. But you're right. There's a heck of a lot more ice breaking that's going on right now by the United States that happens in Antarctica and has for decades. But people don't, for some reason, they don't make that connect. When we're talking about a new icebreaker, and maybe it's because it is the Alaskans that are the loudest advocates for this. But our reality is that the Arctic, the polar star is going to be working in Antarctica to the end of her useful life. We're not going to see her in the Arctic. Not between the work that she's got committed down there and the fact that she needs to come back for a little bit of a brush up in between seasons. There's just no time to run her to the north. And if you figure 6 to 8 years in her already modified life, there's not much time left, and this is why the need to get moving on an icebreaker is so imperative, but a recognition that one icebreaker just doesn't cut it, because our reality is the new icebreaker, more likely than not, is going to go down there. So what have we done to help facilitate Arctic work? It just puts more work on the Healy full-time all the time. So when I mention, needing a fleet, we've got to get serious about what that really means. I could make, again, I must have eaten something interesting for breakfast this morning, and I could say that most people, when they think of ice, they just think of Alaska, and that's why this has been viewed, an icebreaker has been viewed more as an Alaskan earmark. We have made some headway, we have made some progress on that, but it has been slow and it's been frustrating, and the years are clicking by, and we know how long it takes to build an icebreaker, or at least an icebreaker that the federal government builds. It takes a long time and a lot of money, and so recognizing that we know we need it, let's get it moving now. And let's not just get one. If we want to be smart stewards of the federal taxpayer dollars, we're going to have a program where it's more than one every 40 years. So we've got our work cut out for us, and then some.
I think I want what you have for breakfast. Thank you, Senator. Yes. Givey, one more question. It's not about icebreakers, though.
Not about icebreakers, Nils.
Thank you.
Senator Murkowski, thank you for all that you do for our wonderful state. I have a question for both panelists, if you could briefly maybe elaborate on it first and then kick it over to my brand new friends from the Faroe Islands. You guys have some Alaskan genes, it seems like. All I ever hear about is the Faroe Islands today, which I think is outstanding. It must be a trait of people from up north. My question to you, Senator Murkowski, is what strategies or techniques do you have us in government that we can be doing our parts to better support America's Arctic, which happens to be Alaska, but it's all of our Arctic. It's America's Arctic. It's the world's North Arctic. And you convinced 5 of your colleagues to come to Alaska in the middle of winter to hear about issues. What terms or techniques did you use to convince your peers that are yet to be convinced about the needs of Alaska and Arctic and the circumpolar North and indigenous needs to do what they just did for you? How can we do that better in our world?
I promised him a snow machine ride. Seriously, I said we're going to go from Bethel down to Oscarville. We're going to take snow machines. And then, of course, we couldn't because there wasn't enough snow on the river. I'm being a little bit light about that. But the fact of the matter is people are intrigued about the Arctic. They want to see it. They want to be able to say they've seen it. And some of them want to be able to say that they've been there, not when the fish are running, but when it's winter time. And so maybe it was just a few of the more hardy souls. I will point out that one was from Montana, one was from we had Montana, Wyoming, West Virginia. So these are not, I didn't really get any urban senators, okay? I'm working on that. But there is that mystique. And so let's build on that. Let's say, and I did, I promised them Northern Lights. I promised them caribou. We didn't get the caribou, we didn't get the Northern Lights, and we didn't get the snow machine. But they did get to be on a very unusual motorcade. We had about a dozen trucks going down the Kuskokwim River, the frozen river. It's their road in the wintertime. And they thought that that was the coolest thing. Actually, they were a little freaked out because they thought that we were going to go into the river. But let's utilize the mystique of the Arctic. I am so pleased that the decision was made that the ministerial meeting for the Arctic Council was going to be in Fairbanks instead of Anchorage, because Anchorage, my home, good place, but it looks too much like the rest of the country. And Fairbanks, in fairness, has some nice restaurants and good hotels too, but you're just that much closer to the Arctic environment. You're just a little bit further out, and quite honestly, you get much better northern lights in Fairbanks, even in the summertime. So any way that we can draw people to it. And this is where I think the president did an important favor to the Arctic. When he goes, there's reporters, there's cameras, and he did some real life things like holding up a fish and things like that that made it real. We need to do more to raise the awareness, raise the education, but you and I know that there's no substitute for being there yourself. So let's draw people there, and to have the Secretary of Energy join me and 5 colleagues, it was a big deal. It was a big deal, and hopefully it got the attention. I have a growing list of people who are like, hey, how come you didn't take me? And I said, I got a trip for you, so we're going to work on it.
I think it's great. It's been a quite strange discussion, I must say, because we're revolving about the same issue for several hours. We've had a guy from Finland explaining about their icebreakers, their fleet of icebreakers, their construction of icebreakers. We've heard about the Norwegian icebreakers. We have heard from one country. If we just had one icebreaker, what could we do to build one icebreaker? Just one. Is there anything we can do? Gather everything.
Any ideas out there?
One. If somebody came here from not knowing which country we were from, they would say, Lisa Murkowski must be from a very small country, maybe the Faroe Islands or something. What about Guggenheim just paying for that fucking icebreaker?
And on that note, we're adjourned.
That's it.
Thank you, Mr. Yeah, we are. I think we're done with that. I can't stop. I want to. We are going to take just a quick break. I want to. Before you do, I just want to thank again our sponsors for this event. And we will be at the Norwegian ambassador's residence later this evening. So I want to thank the Norwegian embassy, but also all the Nordic embassies for coming together and helping to host that event. I want to thank again Guggenheim for their support, especially of lunch, and ASRC, Edison Schwest, GCI, Bering Straits Native Corporation, Van Ness Feldman, North Star Group, Alaska Airlines, and World Affairs Council of America. And I should note that for the World Affairs Council of America, they've done a great job of promoting this event to their memberships across the U.S. So the live stream is available then to all their members. So we're everybody just heard that comment around the U.S. Mr. Scott.
Guggenheim's going to be lining right up.
Yes, yeah.
If they don't, the Faroe Islands, we're going to give it to you.
Yeah.
We're going to give it to you.
Even better.
We'll
Very
talk.
good prestige for us.
So a good opportunity to connect with each other then on these topics out in the break, and we'll reconvene at a more domestic level in just about 25 minutes. So thank you.